Hi, this is Simon Obstill and welcome to part 3 of this tutorial in which we're looking at creating this spaceship scene using a mixture of Blender and Motion. And today we're going to be taking a look at principally the build of the main spaceship in Blender. And we're going to start getting into some pretty serious modeling, which I hope you'll find interesting. So let's get cracking. So this is where we left it last time. We just built our sphere. So we need to just do a little bit of housekeeping here. Let's select the sphere, Command C, and let's put it into our built objects scene, and then come back to our build scene and delete the sphere. And now we can start on the much more exciting part of building the exterior of the ship's body. And we're going to be doing some really fun modeling with this. So our base object is going to be add mesh torus. Now I want to pay some attention to how this is set up. I want 132 segments because I want something that's divisible by 6. You'll see the reason for that later on. And then I also want 3 minor segments, and I want you to watch what happens when I do that. It creates this 3-sided torus, and that's going to be the perfect base for our spaceship. So we can click on the viewport to confirm that. And let's call this body. Now, this is going to be a bit bright for us to be looking at this material. So we could switch over to this grey version, but I actually want it darker still. So I'm just going to stick with this, and I'm going to come to the materials, and I'm just going to make a new material. And I'm going to darken it down quite a bit. So we're just not staring at that kind of horrible glaring thing. And it's going to be much easier, much more pleasant to work with. So the first thing I want to do is I want to come into edit mode and hit A to select everything. And we're going to be using a new tool called loop cut. As you see, it allows us to put a cut into the object that we're making. So I'm going to let go of it roughly around here. And then I'm just going to set that number specifically to -0.4. And then I'm going to make another one and just drag it down to roughly there. And this one I'm going to set to 0.7. And let's deselect the tool. So the first thing I'm going to do is switch over to faces mode. And let's select this ring of faces around the top. So I can do that by holding down the Alt or Option key and clicking on any one of those faces. And then I can come over and select the Extrude tool. And that brings up this gizmo. And then we can just drag that upwards. I'm not going to give you exact numbers for that, just sort of eyeball it. Something like that is going to be good. And let's drop that tool. Now, one of the things we want to avoid with 3D modeling is these very, very sharp edges that we get. And what we'll be doing a lot of is beveling to soften off those edges. And so we'll switch over to the edges mode. And then if we alt click on this loop here, and then click on bevel, if we drag very gently upwards like that, we get a bevel. Let's do the same thing with this loop here. So again, Alt or Option click that loop, and then just drag upwards till we get a bevel that we like. If you want to constrain that to operate more slowly, hold down the Shift key and you'll get a less aggressive result. So now let's take a look at the bottom rim. So I'm going to switch again to Edit Faces, and holding down the Option key, I'm going to select that ring there. Again, let's switch to the Extrude tool and just eyeballing this, let's raise up the rim like that. Let's switch over to Edges mode. So that's 2. We want to select this top edge here. So Alt click that top edge. Now we'll use the Scaling tool. So that's S. And then that brings up this gizmo, and we can just scale it out very gently. If you want to constrain it, just use the Shift key, just makes it easier to control. Something like that. I'm just trying to get it sort of in the middle like that. And then I'm going to switch to the Move tool, and using the Z-axis, this vertical one here, again, just with the Shift key, just bring it down gently like that, just to flatten it off. And I think I'm happy with that. So let's select the object. Let's hit 7 on the number pad to see the top view, and let's zoom in to this area here at the bottom, and again switch back to edit mode. So what I want to do is I want to make a panel, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to select 3 faces on that side of the line, 3 faces on that side of the line, so I'm in faces mode obviously. Select those, and then I'm going to right click and come down and separate selection, or the P key is in fact the shortcut for that. So select that, and you'll see that that has cut out this selection. It's actually made a hole in the body, and we actually need to fix that hole in the body before we move on. And we'll go back to a technique we learned right at the beginning. So if we switch to edges mode, we're going to select those edges and these edges, and then we'll bridge the edge loops. So I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to control click here, and you'll see that's selected all the loops in all the edges in between, and that's great. So now I can shift click here and control click here, and then come to edge, bridge edge loops, and we've repaired the hole in the hull. So let's turn off the main body and turn back on that selection. Select it in object mode, and then come into edit mode, come to faces mode, select them all. So let's select one, A to select them all, and then turn the body back on again. And then let's use the extrude tool again. So extrude, and we're just going to drag it up sort of like this. We're going to do it more or less by eye, and I think that's probably about right. And then what I want to do is I want to loop slice this new object. So select one, select all using the A key, and then come to loop cut, and then let's just drag it down. I want to be kind of roughly, that'll do for me, I think. So let's come out of loop cut mode, and then I want to select this bottom row of edges. So we're still in edge mode. Select that one, control click to select that one. We'll use the move tool, and what I want to do is I want to bury that bottom edge in the geometry of the hull. So something like that, just so it's on the edge there. I think that's going to be the sort of thing that I want. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this top edge here. So select one of those, control click to select the opposite end, and just bury it in the hull. So here I'm just going to drag it down like that. I kind of want it halfway up that edge there, and I think that's probably good. So now we can bevel this. So let's select this edge here, and this edge here, this one, and then this one, control click this one. And then let's select the bevel tool, and let's drag upwards till we've got a nice bevel for them all. So that's looking good so far. And now what I want to do is I want to cut some holes in this panel. And to do that, we're going to come out of edit mode, back into object mode. We're going to add mesh UV sphere. So what I want is a radius of 0.024. And then I want to adjust its position location. So the Y location is going to be -1.21, and the Z is going to be 0.075. And that's put it just on that edge there. That is probably exactly where I want it. So now I can click on it, Control A, and bake its transforms. And now we can make an array of it. So to make an array, as you remember, we need to add object, empty. Let's go with arrows this time. I'll put arrow just for a change. And that's put that null right in the center there. Let's call this null. Let's reselect the sphere. Let's come to the wrench icon, add modifier array. Let's set the count to 5. Let's turn off relative offset and turn on object offset. Let's, from this menu here, select the null, and then coming over to the null, let's rotate by 3 degrees on Z. And you can see we've got that nice little array of spheres. Let's bake that array. So select the array, Control A to bake it. With this sphere selected, let's come to the object properties and let's just rotate it through -6 degrees. So it's like sitting lined up with our panel. And let's select it in the viewport, Control A, and bake its transforms. And now we can use that to cut out the panel. So let's select the panel. Let's again come to the wrench icon, add modifier, Boolean, and let's select the sphere as the Boolean source. And we can turn it off, and you can see we got that nice little row of divots there. So lots of really fancy geometry for not a lot of work. And I like that kind of thing. So let's bake this new array by hitting Control A with the modifier selected there. Bakes it down. Let's call this panels. And then we can make an array of the panels. So let's select the wrench icon again, add modifier array. Let's have a count of 6. Let's again turn on object offset. Let's select the null. So come back to our null. We want here a rotation of 60. If we zoom out, you can see we've got those panels all the way around our ship. So let's tidy things up a bit. We don't need that sphere anymore. Let's delete that. And we need to bake that array. So select the array, Control A. So what I also want to do is have the panels be a child of the body. So I'm going to select the panels and I'm going to hold down the Shift key and drag them into the body there. And now if we select the body, we can rotate everything together and the panels follow. So I'm going to set the rotation to 30 because I want to be able to focus on this bit of the body here. Let's hit 7 again. So I just want to focus on again on that lower segment. Let's switch into edit mode. And I'm just going to select these two faces here. And then again, I'm going to right click and use separate selection or use the P key. And you see it's made a new object and that I'm going to call rib. So let's come back out of edit mode into object mode, reselect that object and its faces in edit mode. And then I want to extrude them. So select the extrude tool. And again, let's just do the same kind of scaling that we did before, something like that. So before I go too far, I also need to repair again that hole in the hull. So let's turn off the rib, come out of edit mode to select the hull, come back into edit mode. And then we want to select these top edges and the bottom edges. So we need to be in edge mode. So select these two, roll over, select these two. And as you know, we can now come to edge, bridge edge loops, and we've repaired that hole. So let's turn the rib back on again. Again, I think I'd probably like to create an edge loop on this. So we need to select the rib, come into edit mode, faces, select one, select all. Let's make a loop and let's bring it down to the same sort of point, maybe not quite so far down, somewhere like that I think I'm going to like. And release that, come out of that mode there. So at this point I ran into every tutorial maker's nightmare, which is to make a mistake that didn't become obvious until the edit. So if things don't look quite the same as I build this rib, that's because I'm trying to patch this into the overall tutorial. And the rib won't look quite like this going forward. So I'm just going to temporarily turn off the body. And then in edges mode, I want to select these edges here. And then I want to press S for scaling and X to constrain the scaling and then just scale it in like that, which is quite a nice feature. So then we're going to select these edges here and again SX, just scale those in similarly. So the thing that I need to do, and I didn't do last time in order to avoid problems, is to scale out these bottom edges. Otherwise, when I want to do what I want to do, we're going to get twisting and the whole shape is going to fall apart. So I need to select these ones here, SX, and just scale them out so that they're wider than the top. And just again, the same with this one here. Let's go to the top view just to make sure we're seeing this correctly. SX, and just scale it out like that. And then what I want to do is to scale these ones in, and that's why I needed to do that. So if I scale those in like that, there's hopefully no problem with any of the geometry, and I'm relieved that I've fixed it. So then I want to turn the body back on again, and as before, I want to drive these edges into the hull. So I'm going to select those top edges there and just push them back like so. Let's check everything is okay still. That's looking good. And then select these front edges here, push them down like that. Check everything is still looking good. So a couple of other things I'd like to do here. We're still in edges mode. I'd like to select this edge here and then select the bevel tool. And if I bevel it, I can widen it out like that. And then I'm going to come to the side view just to check this out and select the extrude tool. And I just want a very slight ridge like that. And that kind of gives us an interesting extra feature. This certainly wasn't in the previous version. I could probably bevel that, but let's not get carried away. What I need to do is I need to bevel these main edges. So let's select this edge here, this edge here, this edge here, and this edge here. And then select the bevel tool and then drag up just till we soften those off like so. And then I might just bury the ends of these in the geometry. So let's turn off the body so we can see that edge there. Turn the body back on again, select the move tool and just slide it down like that. Makes for a more interesting profile. Same thing here, select that top edge there and then just push it down just like that. And so we've now got a much nicer rib than I had before, and hopefully you can build it in the same way and you're going to be happy. And at this point we can resume normal service. So again, what we can do is to make an array of these ribs. So let's come out of edit mode. Let's bake the transform for the ribs. So Control A, all transforms, zeroes out that rotation there. And then we can come to the wrench, add modifier array, set the count to 5 because I want to leave space for the windows of the ship. I don't want the same number as before. So turn off relative, object offset, we can just select null. And now if we zoom out and indeed look at the top view, you can see we've got the ribs in between and then this blank space where we can put the windows. So the final major bit of modeling I want to do is to create a set of vents all the way around the hull. So let's select the hull in the viewport there. And what I want to do is I want to loop slice it. So I'm going to come into edit mode and with faces selected, select the loop cut tool. And I want to make some loops like that. So roughly a square there at the bottom and roughly another square. And then there's probably a mathematical way I could be doing this, but can't be bothered. So something like that. So we've got some squares like that, and that's what we can use for our vents. So let's come into faces mode. So I'm going to select this face, hold down the Control key, select that one, hold down the Shift key, select that one, Control, select that one, Shift, Control, Shift, Control. And now we've got our vents selected and we can right click and separate. And let's call that new item vents. So what I am going to do is I'm going to select them in object mode and then Shift D enter to make a duplicate. And one of them I'll rename vents cut because I want to use it as the cutter for the rest of the ship. And the other one is going to be called vents rim. So let's turn off vents rim for the time being. Let's select vents cut. Let's come into edit mode. Let's select one face and then A to select them all. And then we're going to come to the extrude tool So what I want to do is extrude downwards into the body. So I'm going to push down, and then here, because we can't actually see what's happening, I'm just going to enter negative 0.14 into the value there, and hopefully I haven't gone through the bottom of the ship. No, that's good. And then I need to reselect these top faces. So select, Control, Shift, Control, Shift, Control, Shift, Control. And then I want to extrude them upwards to make sure that our cutter goes right through the body. So now if I turn off the body, it's looking like this. So now what we need to do is make an array of these cutters. So I'm just going to select them in object mode, and let's make sure we've baked their transforms. And because this Boolean can be a little bit unpredictable, I'm going to make sure to fill in those holes in the hull, I think. Select the hull. Let's come to edit mode, edges. Do this very quickly. You don't need to see me doing this. So sped on through that. And now we can do what we were talking about, which is to make an array of the cutters. So vents cut. Let's come to object mode. Let's select them. And we have made sure to bake all the transforms, I think. Let's select the wrench icon. Let's come to add modifier array. Let's set the count to 5 as before. Let's turn off relative offset and turn on object offset and select the null. So now our cutters are running around as they should, leaving a space for the window, which is what we want. So now we can bake that array. So Control A on the array there. Select the body, add modifier, Boolean, and let's select vents cut from the list. And let's turn off vents cut and see what's happened. So nothing has happened, but I think that's because we need to use fast for this. And fast is going to give us the result. So sometimes exact is just too finicky, and there, because we were sort of cutting into the same edges, it probably didn't like it. So that's perfectly good. That's exactly what we want, and we can bake that Boolean. Control A. So the reason I made this thing called vents rim is that without some sort of edge to those vents, they're just not going to look right when we visualize them in 3D properly. So I'm going to make a little sort of raised edge to all of those vents. So let's turn back on the rim. Let's turn off the body so we can find it. And in actual fact, let's turn off the panels and rib as well, just so. So there we go. That's the rim item. I'm going to select it in the viewport, go into edit mode, select all of those, and then I'm going to use the inset faces tool, that one there. And if we just drag gently, you see we can create just an edge like that. And then if I now hit delete and select faces, we can delete those inset faces. And now we've got a nice little edge there. And then we can select those, all of them, come to the extrude tool, and just very gently extrude them upwards. We don't want to go terribly far, something like that. And then we're going to select the bevel tool, and again, just very gently bevel those in. We don't want to make anything cross over, and I think that's just enough. So there you go, that's our rims, and obviously all we need to do now is array them. So coming to object mode, select them, and let's make sure their transforms are baked. So bake all transforms. You just never know. It's always best to play safe. Let's turn back on the body and everything else as well. And to the vents rim, we're going to add modifier array, do the exact same thing as we've done each time. So count of 5, relatives offset off, object offset on, and use the null. And voila, those rims have appeared on all of those vents, and that sort of detail, you know, even if it wasn't about just visibility, that sort of detail really helps to kind of add visual richness. So there's only one more thing we now need to do, and that's to create the windows on this segment here. But first, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. So there are a couple of arrays that we haven't baked. So the ribs there, let's bake that, and vents rim, let's bake that one as well. and let's make them into children of the body. So holding down the Shift key, drag rib into body, fence rim, holding on the Shift key, drag it into body. And that means that we can rotate the body and everything rotates with it, because again, if we hit number pad 7 for the top view, and I want to rotate the body so we can focus on this area here, and that's 90 degrees. So let's zoom in on that. Let's come into edit mode. And what I want to do is want to select these four, or rather these 8 faces there, leave a gap, and holding down the Shift key, I want to select these 6 faces here and these 6 faces on this side. And then I want to separate them as before. So separate selection. And this time I'm not going to bother filling the holes that I've left. But what I am going to do is I am going to come to inset faces and just slightly inset them like that. And then I'm going to come to the move tool and just move those faces upwards like that, and possibly a little bit outwards. That is going to be good, I think. So what I can do with the material editor is simply select these faces here and make them a different material from the rest of the body. So time to do some material editing, because we've done our modeling now. So let's switch to object mode and select the body, and let's come over to shading. And let me hit period on the number pad to frame it up. Now you remember we'd actually already created a grey material as we were working, but what we're going to do is add a texture. So add texture, image texture, and open, go to our assets and look for ship body. Open that up, color into base color. And now we've got our ship pretty well. There's various issues, but we can sort them all out. It depends how much time we want to spend on it. I'm seeing lots of things that I want to fix. I probably won't fix them all. So what we want to do is we want to make this 100% metallic. And I think just for the fun of it, let's just reduce the roughness, because why not make it shiny, eh? So some of the things I'm seeing are quite easily fixed. So you'll see that the edge of this rib, we've got some very obvious sort of stretching. So let's select that. Let's come over to UV editing. Select any face, then A to select them all. And then 7 on the number pad to see the top view. And then I think the best thing to do with this is simply just project from view. So if we hit U and then select project from view, that actually doesn't look too bad. And we could just scale these up a bit. So we've got our universal tool there, just get a bit more value out of the texture. But I think that's probably good enough for those. We're seeing the same thing with the edges of our panels, but that's a little bit more problematic. So you might want to skip this bit, but I'm just going to show you anyway. So what we're actually going to have to do is a little bit of remodeling. So let's come back to the modeling tab, and in object mode, let's select those. Now the problem at the moment is they're parented to the body, and we can't actually isolate them in the way that we would like to. However, if we right click and come to parent and clear and keep transformation, then they've popped out into their own space, and we can turn off the body and we can just see these panels now. And what we actually need to do is we need to delete all these underneath faces. So let's switch to edit mode. I'm not going to go through all of them with you, but just to show you basically what I mean is all of these here, those 2, select them all, delete faces. Let's do one more, and then I'll assume you've understood what I mean. So select all of those, this as well, all of these, and then delete faces. And you need to do that with all 6. So I'll come back when you've done that. So now you should be looking like this, and there's sort of no bottom faces to those. Let's come back into UV editing, come to the top view and select all the faces. And now what we can do, I think, is hit U and unwrap. And you see that it's unwrapped them really nicely and positioned them across the surface of our texture. And that's going to be a much, much better result. So you see that because it's now got an edge to work with, it understands the geometry of the panels much better. So that was the answer to that one. And it's something I probably should have thought of in advance, but not having thought of it meant that I could actually give you an overview of how that might be done. So there are two other obvious problems that we've got on the actual body. So let's come to UV editing. What we want to do is select this row of faces here. So Alt or Option click that, and then U and unwrap. And you see again, that's really mapped that nicely across the entirety of the texture. And let's do the same thing with this bottom row. Alt click to get the row, U, and then unwrap. Same thing. You see that just looks so much nicer, so much less amateurish. So, I mean, there are other things we could do. That one's not good either, but let's not get carried away. I keep on telling myself. So the only thing left to do is to make these windows emit light. So let's come back to our shading and let's rotate around till we can see those. We need to be in edit mode. And what we need to do is we need to make a new material. So let's click on the plus sign there, new. And the only thing we care about here, as before, is emission. So let's set the emission color to white. And let's go with 7 for the emission strength. And then we're going to select these faces, and then we can select our new material and assign. And you see now we've got, just as we had with our energy ball, we've got a sort of a multi-material object. Again, it's such a handy technique to know about. So because you're much tidier than me, you'll want to rename this material as Windows and the other one as Ship, just in case you want to come back and edit them. So now we're in a position to export this, and there's only one thing we need to do, and that's to remove this vents cut object, because we don't need that anymore. Just delete that. So I think we can now come to File, Export, GLTF, and Ship. And I'm going to overwrite the one I've already done. And just checking that we're all good in Reality Converter. That looks pretty good to me. So I think at this point we will take a break, because that's half an hour of grueling work for you. And we'll come back for a very short one where we bring this ship into motion and composite the final scene. So I hope you can join me for that one. Thanks very much for sticking with this. I hope you've learned some interesting stuff.